It's Monday, yeah?
Yes.
And here we are for another episode of Dualistic Unity Raw. That's always fun for me to do. And here we are for another episode of Dualistic Unity Raw. I was just talking about the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett, which I know I've talked about previously. A number of things in that series catch my attention and kind of make me laugh. One of which was the idea that in the main city in this world, the largest city in this world, they don't necessarily worry about the thieves, because what they've done is created a guild of thieves who only rob from people who don't necessarily pay for protection. But that also means that anybody who's stealing in the city and doesn't have a license has to pay to the Guild of Thieves. And by pay, I mean they get punished by or possibly murdered. And so the thieves regulate themselves, and the shop owners and people, rather than paying for security, just pay the thieves to leave them alone, which is kind of straightforward and really funny. The other part that I love about one series of characters within the Disc world would be the Wee Free Men, or the Knack McFeagle. And I've talked about them before. Basically, at first glance, they look like Smurfs, but then you realize that the only reason that they're blue is because they're covered in body tattoos. And basically, they are hooligans and robbers, and they love to pick fights, and they'll pick fights with a full-grown human being and win. Like, they've been seen stealing cows, one under each hoof, just lifting the cow and walking away. Their leader's name is Rob Anybody. So they're a lot of fun. But what's great about them is not only are they rowdy and fuck shit up, but they believe that they're already dead. They believe that this is the afterlife, that this is their reward for living a life that was otherwise boring, possibly in an office previously. And that after dying, they are now here to enjoy themselves. And that's the philosophy that they live with. And if they die here, they go back to that boring life and get a job. Isn't that an incredible way of looking at the world? Because why the fuck not? How do you know?
Oh, I love that way of looking at the world, because you don't know. Like, you could come up with any way of thinking about things. You can come up with any way, any perspective to have about how things are going. And why not pick the one that's going to help you relax a little bit more? And it's funny because that's actually something that hit me this morning, how much there's been like a running from fear in a sense, or things I'm worried about. But what about, instead of doing that, I just used it as a practice of, like, let's see, say, for example, with, I don't know, getting on a live stream and thinking there's like a right way to do this. Let's see, or being afraid of being awkward. What if, instead of being afraid of being awkward, which is only going to make you more awkward and tense, like, trying to be, like, purposely being awkward and weird, and like seeing how well you can relax, or not relax, but like laugh at yourself as you're doing that, and kind of using that as a practice. Like, instead of being afraid of whatever thing you're concerned about doing, like, looking at that as an opportunity to be a little bit more free in yourself, and take yourself a little bit less seriously. So actually going towards the thing, kind of like we were talking about yesterday with the cows versus the buffaloes, like running from the storm versus running towards it. How cows run away from the storm and it just stays with them, versus buffaloes run towards it and it kind of goes through them. Because which mentality is going to help you relax the most is the thing that's going to then shift your experience the most. And so, yeah, it was just, I don't know, sometimes things hit me in a way that it just feels a little bit different, especially if you've been going through, I don't know, whatever stuff in your head can be going on. But it's funny when you let go of the fear so much of something happening and kind of shift that perspective, and then, like, okay, if it happens, maybe or yeah, being on a podcast and thinking of like the right way to do it. What if instead you just did the thing that you were afraid of doing, and then were able to laugh at yourself while you were doing it? And just like that ability to just like not take yourself as goddamn seriously is really powerful. Like, if you can just not take yourself quite so seriously, it changes everything, because we put a lot of gravity on the immediacy of whatever we're doing, but the impact that's had is our mentality as we go through it, as opposed to how well we do. And we, like I say, I can just get caught up in taking myself very seriously, and it's like, that's what it's all like, oh my God, that gets in the way of so many things, because I'm afraid of doing all of those things. It's like, that's where I'm going to be the most tense. And like, I'm not going to be relaxed if I just look at it and be like, no, let's try and make it happen. Let's run towards that storm, and then use it as practice to be able to laugh at myself. And again, I'm saying this, but it's like, obviously can be easier said than done, especially when you're feeling really fucking down and whatnot and caught up in shit. But it's a little bit of that shift in perspective. And as soon as that relaxation is there, it's like things have a different feeling. Things have a different, you see things a little bit differently, or as Ray's brought up before with thoughts, like when you're tense, you're gonna have different thoughts than when you're relaxed. And it totally shifts, like, just everything that's going on. And so what's the quickest point to relaxation is like running at that motherfucker, like running towards the storm, like being cool with that happening. Like, and again, it's like so much easier said than done, because I was even thinking about just any sort of situation. And as soon as there's, people involved, it's one thing to think about this when you're like sitting alone and on your couch or something, but then it's like when the situation is there, it's a lot easier said than done, but it's still just an idea of what you think should be happening versus not. And as soon as that shifts, it's like the relaxation is there, even just a little bit more, and then it totally changes the experience. So that was the insight, the insight that sort of hit me this morning, that yeah, I was thinking about. And that's how it was came out of me. But yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because what you were saying is like, there is no right way. If I can just face what I'm afraid of and then laugh at it, it's like, well, that sounds a lot like the right way. Like, I can't imagine that sounding like any better of a way, because you're going to face things that you're afraid of. And if you can't laugh at it, then it's just going to continue to suck. So it really just comes down to your response, and not just to your response, but your response to your response. Like, after you respond, are you thinking about it? Are you beating yourself up? Are you analyzing your progress? Are you judging how you're doing? Or did you just respond? And now are you given the same opportunity to respond again? Oh, I don't really know. And then move on. Right? So it's always being in that driver's seat. It's always being in that state of in that state of being where it comes down to you. But a lot of that means taking the space, as it were. You said something. I had a bunch of thoughts, actually. You said something about it being easier said than done, and that's something that we've said repeatedly, and it's something that I've had thrown back at me numerous times in my life, just because, of course, it's very simple, not easy. Of course, it's easier said than done, because it's easy to say shit. It's easy to say shit. It's easy to say, I get that. It's easy to say, I'm sorry, right? It's easy to make a promise. It's easy to say shit straight up. So none of what we're talking about is meant to be easy to do. We know it's easy to say, but it wasn't easy to get to a point where we could say it. And we had to go through shit to be able to say it this way, with this degree of investment and this degree of authenticity. It's not just words, is what I'm saying. I'm not just giving you lip service, as it were, and just making you feel better. I'm telling you things that I've gone through to see. And that's the only reason that I can say them at the end of the day. But that said, of course, it's easier to say. But that said, I want to go back to the point that I was thinking previously about Nanak McFeagle, about the idea that we've already died and this is the afterlife. Do you think it's possible that we fucked up heaven?
Oh, that was left for me. I wasn't sure if the click was the mute or uh, that's like even just that right there, like that question, that perspective, that wondering, like heaven is and I've gone on rants before about the absurdity of heaven if you actually think about what it would look like your idea of heaven, what is that? Like, oh, everything I want to happen. It's like, okay. And if it's everything you want, is there anyone else there? Is there any interaction with anyone? Because then their wants are going to come into play. And it's very unlikely that everyone's wants aren't going to be the same exactly what they think is best. And how often do we think something's best for us and then it's actually not, or it takes us down a path that we don't deem to be the best. And then, there's all these other people. So there's all these overlapping situations going on. And then, and just taking the Christian approach, like animals don't go to heaven, plants don't go to heaven. So it's this very stale, like concrete fucking place without a whole lot else going on. But like, if you want a dog to be there, then it's like, is that how it goes? What if someone else hates dogs so much? Then is there going to be no dogs? And it's just so anyway, I'm not going to go on a whole spiel with that. But like when you actually look at some of these things that we hope for, it doesn't make much sense. And there's this song by Slowly Slowly, shout out Slowly Slowly, and Ben Stewart, who we've had on the podcast, previous guest, called God, and talks a little bit about that. I won't, go into I forget the exact lyrics, but it's a great song. Highly recommend checking it out because it kind of talks about that perspective of heaven and God and just how much we focus on that while we're missing what's going on right now. And all that's ever going on is what's going on right now. And so this idea of heaven is just a way to continue to miss out on, avoid what's going on right now. And so that question, like, did we fuck up heaven? Certainly very well might have. Certainly very well could have. Like, who's to say that this isn't it right now? Who's to say that we're not already dead right now? Like I was saying, with the overlapping perspectives, the overlapping stories, situations, a bunch of other people, a bunch of variables, variations, like what is telling you that this isn't heaven right now? And I'm not saying like, oh, this is heaven, just like, oh, well, what about all the suffering? It's like, if there was this much imbalance in people wanting things for themselves, of course there's going to be a bunch of shit going on in heaven. Like we have this very siloed point of view, like this very cut off perspective of what heaven might be like, but there's nothing that could tell me that this isn't possibly heaven right now, or at least has the potential to be, but we want someone else doing it for us. We don't want to look at these things. We want to just be able to point out, like we were talking a little bit yesterday, just with issues going on in the world. Like everyone loves pointing fingers and being able to come up with, oh, well, this is, this is what's wrong with this. These people got to do this. That person's got to do that. It's like, okay, what are you doing? It's like, well, I'm I'm too far from that. It's like, all right, is there anything you can do in that direction? It's like, yeah, but then I'd have to do things differently than the way I'm doing them. It's like, yeah, exactly. And that's where those conversations tend to end when they start getting uncomfortable when it comes back to the realization that like reality stems from us, society stems from us. Like we are reality, we are society. It's we get, it's very easy. And even saying we, like I've caught myself saying we, and say we, just whatever. I'm talking to myself. Like you don't have to catch yourself every single time you're like we, and making the assumption, because you're always just speaking from your perspective. But being able to say, oh, society's so fucked up. All you're saying is I'm fucked up. There's not a disconnect. There's not a division between you and the world, you and society, you and reality, you and whatever the fuck is happening. And it's like we want there to be, because it makes us feel kind of weird when there isn't, because it's harder to talk from that mountaintop, from that raised platform, from that stage. looking down on everyone else who's in society. It's like, and then we'll say society like it's just some arbitrary thing out there, kind of like heaven, kind of like anything. Like we'll talk about it in the same way and discount the fact that we are it. It's not like we're in it. It's not like it's something like we're perpetuating it each and every moment as we go with the things that we focus on and prioritize and the ways that we act and the experiences that we're having. And so, yeah, back to your question, did we possibly fuck up heaven? Certainly, because anything telling you that this doesn't have the potential to be is just a assumption and familiar story that, I don't know, probably makes it feel a little bit more comfortable, like you can't be involved. But then, like we were saying yesterday with the fucking channelers, thinking that we're not involved in it is incredibly disempowering. Like recognizing that we are it is incredibly empowering, as much as it's like, you know, let's do something about it. It's like there can be things done about it. Like the change you make in your life, the shift in your focus, whatever it may be, changes things probably more so than you realize, because we discount the impact of those shifts. We like to look at it in the immediacy, but we never know how it ripples, what it leads to, who and what it impacts.
It's kind of a fun mental exercise, though, right? Like you just kind of go through it in your head in the same way that George Carlin went through it in terms of your loved ones staring down at you after they die. And he was just like, is that really what the dead do, is stare at the living? And after a while, it started to get really crowded. And so he kind of broke it down. But if you go and let's just say that, so you have Adam and Eve, and I'm assuming they went to heaven. Let's just say they went to heaven. So Adam and Eve die, and they're the first ones in heaven. All right. So now they're people. They're people. They haven't stopped being people. They haven't stopped being just like you and I, right? So now they're people in an environment. That environment's not clouds, right? It would be an environment like any other environment. And so their personality would suddenly become a part of that environment. Now, all of a sudden, here comes, well, I guess they're kids, or well, let's just admit it, like it wasn't just Adam and Eve, but here comes other people, and now more people are dying, and they're all bringing their personalities, and now they're all intermingling with one another and talking and doing all that, and they're getting bored, and they're like, well, what do you want to do? I don't know. Somebody's selling hot dogs eventually. Like the whole point is that they would just take Earth with them, and so there is nothing saying that this isn't exactly that, right? Because let's just say that we did die, and this is a new life after our awareness moved on to from one experience to another. All of a sudden, to be like, oh, here we are. What are we going to do with it? Because that's the whole story of Genesis, right? That the first people weren't afraid of their environment. They feared nothing in the garden, and they could eat from any fruit. So they knew what they were doing, basically. And they lived in balance with it. And then they started judging themselves. They started wanting control, and they started calling things good and evil. That's why they ate from the knowledge of good and evil. So all of a sudden there was comparison, there was judgment, and thus competition and fear. And that's when all of a sudden they weren't naked anymore. They had to cover themselves up. Right? Well, that's when all of a sudden God was judging them, which couldn't have happened up until then, because it never actually does happen. It was their own self-judgment, because now there was a right and a wrong. There was good and an evil. And in that, there became this necessity to get more control. And that eventually led to one of their children, Cain, creating agriculture. So the story is really just about our march from one mentality to another as reality. Going from being with the forest, living as the forest, living by the forest, as it were. Forest is, kind of a vague term here. It could be whatever your environment was. Living with nature, I guess, versus controlling nature. Because you're trying to control yourself, because there's a right way to live, and thus competition. And that's why the story of Cain and Abel is one son killing the other son, because there's got to be a right way. And Cain followed what he thought was the right way, and then it was rejected by God. And so he killed his brother. Right? Like the whole thing is just a story of the ego taking root in our species or in our collective consciousness, in our awareness, in the awareness of one generation after another, after another, after another. That's all it is. And in the same way, we can turn it around. In the same way, we can turn it around just by recognizing that it's the mentality that's changing the direction. It's not what we're doing in the world, it's where we're coming from that's doing it in the world. I think that's great. I was writing earlier today. I wrote a draft of kind of what DU is about because, of course, we're working on business stuff, and I thought I would just share it with everybody here quickly. Andrew, if you don't mind, good to go. All right, cool. And again, this is a draft. I kind of wrote half of it and then lost what I was saying and went away for like a month and then came back and finished it. So don't judge me or judge me. Go nuts. Selfishness makes sense when we're afraid. And we're always afraid of what we feel separate from. And each action done from that fear of being separate reinforces the very perspective that we are so for someone else. Unwittingly, out of fear of the unknown, we react in a way that proves someone else's fear is justified, and they do the same for us. It's a vicious self-soothing cycle that cannot end unless the perspective it's based upon is addressed directly and the awareness of its impact is integrated in our collective discussion as a very real affliction for humanity and the world. The perspective of division is clearly scientifically untrue, and yet we continue to act and think with full conviction that it is true. While we might tell ourselves intellectually that all energy is connected and always will be, it is our commitment to our self-concept as truth that continues to make it impossible for us to truly recognize what is otherwise obvious. In thinking that you are what you think you cannot be everything else. There is a clear conceptual line drawn between me and the universe or reality in every moment that the idea of yourself is taken as reality. This is not to say that self-image is a bad thing, just that it has consequences, such as selfishness, tunnel vision, and need, when taken too seriously or without awareness of its impact. So the question is, how do we turn the tide? And the answer might shock you. The tide is already turning. We already know that there's something wrong. We see it every day in our collective outcry regarding the ongoing pandemic of mental health issues, rampant homelessness, the widening chasm between the ultra wealthy and everyone else, and the obvious capacity for corruption in our institutions, governments included. And although we may not be actively aware of it, the solution is already taking shape as well. And it's simple. If the current problems we're facing are the result of our individual and collective focus on self-image and our lack of awareness regarding the consequences, the solution would be to organically and consistently undermine that focus and to bring awareness of the consequences. Just as our confusion is the problem, our clarity is the solution. Thus, our mission at Dualistic Unity, if you want to call it that, is to create and sustain a community built around authentically recognized and unifying dialogue rather than a toxic collective of people trying to identify with another concept, self-image, belief structure, or philosophy. Given an opportunity to reflect, question, and find support from others learning from similar insights, members of the community can work freely and at their own pace towards a greater state of self-faith and empathy. And most importantly, as each member experiences change in themselves, that change follows them into the world and all of their other relationships. Enough ripples change the entire pond.
Well said. Yeah, that's fucking awesome. I really, really like that. I had not heard that for anyone listening beforehand, but yeah, that's pretty spot on. Because with the shifts, with the changes, like I was saying before, with talking about society from this, separate perspective, is just reinforcing that separate perspective as opposed to recognizing what's actually going on. Like the whole experience, you're not disconnected from, and that image, that idea, like, isn't the truth. And so as people, no matter where you fall on the line of, whatever situation that you're in, there is the potential for stress, lack of relaxation. Like any amount of, a change in situation does not guarantee a degree of relaxation. Like it's interesting how we'll strive for certain things and the whole time be missing the reality of what we're looking for and the striving for it, like the trying to get to the point in which we relax, for example, is going to just take us further from it. It's like that Chinese finger puzzle, like trying to relax is pulling it apart. Like whatever you're pulling from, whatever you're worried about, just looking at it and being like, yeah, that's all right. It's okay. If that happens and I can laugh at myself, like I'll be good. And so as that changes, then the things that we're using to cope with the stress, because that's so much of what the world is made of right now, is people are fucking stressed out and they look for things to cope with that stress, with that fear, with that concern. And that's what kind of builds and creates this world. So looking at that in the face, the idea that we're so caught up in and focused on, not trying to change someone else, but just doing it in ourselves, like, and not even being, because I'll say sometimes like being an example of being able to relax, not to relax everyone else, because then trying to relax in order to relax someone else isn't really fucking relaxing. It's like, I want them to relax, so I'm going to relax. That's going to get them to relax. But wait a second, they're not relaxing. I got to relax more. And then we're trying to relax, and it's like fucking pulling harder at the Chinese finger puzzle, And so it can't really be about anyone else's experience. Like it's got to be about our own, not trying to impress someone else, not trying to change someone else, not doing it for someone else, not living for someone else. And there's a perspective where people would be like, "Oh, well, that sounds really selfish, just living for me." But when you really do that and you're able to, not from a spot of trying to look the best or build the best idea, but just here and now, living for yourself, like that priority can become that relaxation. And then certain behavioral patterns, certain things that you do just don't make as much sense. Like the hoarding, the more for me, the comparison, the judgment, the the fear, all of those things don't make as much sense when you're relaxed. It's like, why would I fucking stress myself out try like judging someone saying that? It's like, I'm chilling. And then to think like, oh wow, that person's such a piece of garbage, piece of shit. It's like that's not a spot in which you're going to be relaxed. Like that's not an experience that you're going to be relaxed in. And so no matter where in society you are, that spot in which you're just a little bit more relaxed, things start making more sense. A lot of these things are products of stress, trying to get somewhere, constantly trying to become more than what we are. But that's that's a big part of the shift, is not taking that perspective so seriously, the story, the idea, the conceptual thoughts about ourselves, recognizing that maybe I don't know how this is going. Maybe I don't know what I am. Maybe I don't know where my value lies. And what you're left with is not an ability to distract yourself from what's happening right now. And then as the perspective builds of what should be happening, there's stress, tension comes back into play. But until that happens, until the opinion, until the assumption, until the idea of what should be happening relative to like just paying attention to what's actually happening, until that is built, like there is the ability to relax until you start telling yourself another story or trying to gain control of a situation, which is another way of distracting yourself from what's going on right now. And so it really isn't about trying to get someone else to do anything. It's just about being willing to relax, be yourself, and whatever that means, which isn't, living up to your own standard. It's just what you're doing right now. Like the only one telling you that you're doing something wrong right now is you. The only one telling yourself that you're living incorrectly, or at least hearing that and believing it, is you. And so the change stems from us. The shifts stem from us, me, here and now. Just being willing to, you know, let go of my assumptions about what I think is best or being afraid of what may happen next. And as you relax a little bit more, there's less need to look to what's going to happen next. So anyway, that was a nice little ramble, but I think that was yeah, great great description for summary about what DU is all about.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we'll definitely use it in some of our material moving forward. But it's interesting because when you're not focused on getting other people to change, you are left with your own state of mind. And that's where things start to shift. And it's because the experience that we're in is the experience of division. That's experience, division. It's really important to remember that. It's not that division is a bad thing. Without it, there wouldn't be a you versus a me. There wouldn't be a here and a there, right? There wouldn't be time. There wouldn't be any of that. Division is an intrinsic part of everything that we are experiencing. Division is experience itself. And as we grow up in it, we can get totally lost in it, which is why it's important for other people to remind us, while that's true, it is just a perception that we are in fact all still connected. Division is not the truth. It's just what experience is. That's what we are experiencing. So without that, we go out and we continue to act in the mentality of division. We act selfishly, we lash out, we do things that are meant to protect ourselves. We end up committing crimes, we end up hurting others, we end up doing all kinds of things, all in the perspective of division. And so what I find really funny is that you and I will have this conversation where we're talking about the perspective of division, the idea that holding on to this idea of yourself is what's causing all of this merry hell in your life. And people will immediately respond, it's like, yeah, well, how is this going to fix what's happening in Palestine? It's like, understand, that's happening as a result of people still committed to the perspective of division. See what we're saying? Is that it's not going to change anything, but it's going to stop you from contributing to the mentality that keeps that shit going. Because that shit is based on people still believing in the perspective of division. But the answer is always, yeah, well, what about horrible people doing horrible things? Are they part of one too? Yeah. It's like, are they part of me? Yeah, they are. But they're parts of you that don't want to look at that because that's how limitless you are. As you know from your own experience, you don't have to come to terms with your existence. You can run, you can hide, you can try to wrap yourself in a concept that causes you suffering and causes you to create suffering in your path. You can do that. And if you can do that individually, that means any other part of yourself can do that too. That doesn't make them any less part of you. That doesn't make us any less one. It just means that parts of me are still committed to that perspective of division. It's the perspective of division that has grown. And so if it's the perspective of division that has grown, that perspective demands, if I'm in it, that I change other people. Which means the alternative is to just look at what am I reinforcing in my own presence. When you talk to me, am I reinforcing your fear that you're divided from everything? Because that's the problem. We go into the world after growing up in the perspective of division. Nobody tells us that we are actually connected to everything. And so we're terrified of everything that we think is separate from us. And then we run into somebody who's been under the same fear their entire life and they hurt us. And they validate and justify the fear that we are separate. And this is the vicious circle that I was talking about at the beginning of that paragraph that I was reading, was the fact that we get lost in a perspective of division where we unwittingly reinforce that perspective for someone else because we're hurting them because we're blind. And so because we've reinforced it, it just continues to ripple from one person to another. And that's why it's so important to relax. Is because when somebody does encounter you, at least you're not contributing to the conflict. You're not reinforcing the perspective of division because you're not acting from that mentality that you're divided. That is the only way to change direction. Because the alternative is to use force, which is the perspective of division. Without understanding the mentality, nothing we do makes a difference. We can make all of the rules in the world about you need to share, you need to be a nice person, blah, blah, blah. But if it's not coming from a point of self-responsible awareness and empathy and a lack of egotism as the root driving motivator of your life, it doesn't make a difference. You will find a way to corrupt that system. You will find a way around those rules, or at least a way not to get caught.
Yeah, like what you said there with like force and how force is the perspective of division, reinforcing it. Because if you think to apply force, there has to be like, say, apply force against a wall or something. There has to be you and the wall. The force is the division that is then compressed enough that you feel like you're touching it, even though technically you're not. Or control. It's like to control something, you have to grab onto it. And it's like there has to be you and something else. There has to be controller and a controlled. But then, letting go, for example, is like, yeah, it's letting go of those things, but then you're just left with yourself. Then there isn't something being held onto. There isn't that, other thing. And so, yeah, with those, with all of that, with the perspective of control, and I had another thought, and then I went into the control thing, and it's fine. But with applying the force and the control, and just having that perspective and the interactions, there we go, and just the interactions that we have, and like the opportunity to have influence. And again, it's funny because like sometimes I tie myself up with, oh well, how do I do it? Like what is the right interaction to have? It's actually like just letting go of the perspective there being a right way to have an interaction, right? Like thinking that there is a right way is going to focus on the way. Like that's another thing that's immediately there's two. You doing the right thing, but if there isn't, or you doing the wrong thing. But if there isn't a right or a wrong thing, then it's just what's happening, and there isn't so much to grab onto, and there isn't the separation so much anymore. Like I'm doing the right thing immediately. Fucking division right there. I might do the wrong thing. It's like, no, you're just doing what you're doing. There isn't that division so much. And I have been noticing that I've been spitting so much during this episode. Like I've had like a droplet fall out, like I think every time I've spoken today. Anyway,
That's okay because we're not in person, so I'm safe.
right. Yeah, we got a good I don't know, little bit of miles in between us for sure. My computer is taking the brunt of this
We'll
though.
get a spray guard for the retreats.
Yeah. Right.
Hey, I hear you, man. I do it all the time, and it's just because we're talking. Things get saliva-y.
Yeah. Spit is in there. Sometimes it comes on out. Maybe I'll get one of those shield things that people would wear during COVID, wear it to the retreat. But anyway, yeah, having that perspective of there being a way for something to go, a belief about that, like that idea of being able to control or apply force to something immediately. There's that division, but it's like that's so much of the way that we're brought up. That's so much of the way, like the only way to do something is to figure out what the correct way to do it is, which immediately there's a wrong way as soon as you think there's a right way. So, and the other funny part is like, if there's a right way, there's like all the other ways to do something, because it's not just two ways to do something. It's not just right or wrong. It's the right way and then all the other ways which happen to be wrong. So the odds of doing it the quote unquote right way are essentially in that context zero. If there are an infinite number of ways to do things, there is no right way. There couldn't possibly be a right way. But because we want to think of things as like in binary and just simplify it to the point that this is the right thing to do, and this is definitely the best thing to do. What do you mean there's no good and bad? What do you mean there's no right and wrong? It's like, all right, well, if there's a good thing to do, and that's the other part, is like, if there's a bad thing to do, that means all the other things are good to do. And is that the case? It's like, in this situation, killing this person is bad. It's like, all right, what about breaking their leg? Also bad. And it's like this sort of dynamic. And okay, sure, maybe there could be a bunch of bad things to do. That kind of maybe doesn't make as much sense as it did initially in my head. But just with that perspective, there's like the back and the forth, and it's just silos our point of view, which then is very stressful and kind of handcuffs us, and it silos us into tunnel vision, and like any other thing that may happen, there's no adaptability in that perspective either. And so anyway, what you were saying with just interactions having the opportunity to not, at least not reinforce that perspective of division, is just being relaxed in yourself. Like I was talking with someone the other day about like our Patreon calls and how I've just gotten more, or even our free Zooms or whatever, like gotten way more comfortable just being baked and like just kind of laughing, having a good time. And it's just hitting me so much more clearly. Not that I'm doing it for anyone. I'm very much doing it for myself because I'm just having a good time and like having fun. But how I used to go into those thinking like, all right, people are going to come with questions and hopefully I have decent insights. Maybe I didn't literally think it like that, but there it was in there for sure. And whereas now I'm more willing to just kind of like make a fool of myself in a sense, like more willing to just relax, more willing to laugh, more willing to, you know, for, forget what I'm saying. Not that I'm purposely forgetting what I'm saying, but just being willing, not being afraid of doing it. And so if you actually take a step back and think of the impact, think of the situation, say, there's 30, we got 30 people on a free Zoom call on a Wednesday, and most of them are getting on there feeling certain things, feeling maybe a little bit worried or nervous. And again, this isn't me like doing this because I'm making this assumption, but just looking at it, the reality of things, someone hopping on there, maybe they're a little bit afraid to speak. They're worried about forgetting what they're going to say. Like I could go on there and speak really well and just be like, it's okay. You don't have to forget what you're saying. Or I could go on some tangent that I have no idea where I'm going and totally lose my train of thought and then stumble on my words and forget what I'm saying and then be able to laugh at myself. And like, which one's going to have more impact? Which one's going to reinforce me trying to be perfect? Very much reinforcing this idea that like, you should be perfect. Not that I'm saying it, but that that it's like playing into that, or being willing to fall, stumble, relax, forget what I'm saying. And then that, it shifts the environment to be a little bit more relaxed. And so like, if you're a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more willing to laugh at yourself, make a fool of yourself, like that does way more than saying the perfect thing or the right thing or having the best insight, like so much more of an impact. And then, you do that and are willing to go through it. And maybe previously I used to go into calls thinking like being afraid myself of forgetting what I was going to say. Whereas I've gotten more comfortable with just being willing, because that's a deep one for me too. That's something I used to worry about a lot, is like freezing up, forgetting what I'm saying, making sense, whatever the fuck that means. And so the more willing you are to just do that, the more relaxed the environment is going to be. So again, not because you're doing it for other people, but just like when you sit back and really think about, you know, reality or interactions or what's going on. Like if you're willing to set yourself aside and just realize like, oh, me being able to laugh at myself or not be concerned about stumbling, falling, making a fool of myself is gonna make the environment so much more relaxed and anyone interacting with you more comfortable. Like, then is there a better thing to do that you can think of immediately? Or is it just, oh, me never making a mistake is best for who? Just best for you to feel good. And that's a very, very stale experience. Like you're just by yourself, like, yeah, I'm the best. I do everything perfectly. And everyone's like, you can like fucking chill out for a sec, motherfucker. Like maybe it's not all about that. And so anyway, but yeah, for a very, very long time, I was petrified of making a fool of myself. And it still, comes up all the time. Not saying like, oh, I'm totally like, oh, if I were making a fool of myself and never care about making a fool of myself. Like, yeah, it happens for sure. But yeah. Anyway, I got no way to wrap
It's
this up
funny
other than
though.
me just stop talking.
Well, and it's interesting because I think what's important is that you willingly go into whatever you're doing, accepting that somebody might judge you as foolish, knowing that their judgments are more about them than you. And so it changes things, right? It's because you recognize that your own judgments of yourself and others are superficial, are really just the result of fear. And again, that need for control. And so as you're letting go of control, you start to recognize exactly how needy other people are for control. And you start to feel differently about it. Instead of hating people who judge you, you kind of feel sorry for them. And it's because it's a rough place to come from. And if you're feeling sorry for them, you're sure as shit not worried about them as you're dancing on the floor. You're like, oh, you poor bastard, check this out. And it's just because you know that they might hate it as long as you're having fun, but that has nothing to do with you. And again, when you understand where that's coming from, you have a different response to it. I want to mention, because we are over halfway through this episode, that we have a viral video contest. Our California mini retreat is coming up April 11th to April 15th. We have a free ticket available for anybody who wins this viral video contest. I'll post the QR code on the screen here. You can check it out. The details are on the website. If you go under community, there's the viral video contest page. Explains a little bit more about this, but basically, you make a viral video. You make a video about your experience with DU, about DU, of DU, however you'd like to make it. You make the video, be as creative as you can, and whichever video on any platform that we have an account, so TikTok and Instagram specifically, but also if you're on Twitter or YouTube and you can get views on YouTube, go nuts there as well. Tag us in the description of your video, and whoever has the most views come our mini retreat in February. That'd be February 1st. So whoever has the most video views on a single video by February 1st will win that free ticket. That ticket's worth about $1,800. So you can definitely check out the details on our website, not just of the viral video contest, but of the retreat as well, because it's going to be dope. It's in California. It's near Big Bear Lake. We're across the lake from the town itself. So we're actually a little bit rural, close to the lake, close to some trails. It's going to be fucking gorgeous. And you can check out the details on the website. I'll post the QR code for that as well. If you haven't checked this out, definitely do. I'm very excited about this. This is going to be our first mini retreat in California. We have a lot of members in the community in California or around California. So this is going to be a large retreat. I think there's 16 people all together that can come to this retreat. So it's going to be a blast. There's a pool table and all of the stuff that I love to talk about. So if you can join us, definitely do. But create those videos. We've already had some people create videos, and I want to say thank you to all of them. And I appreciate the community backing them up as well. Everybody who has created a video, do remember to go to our community Discord and post the link to that video so the rest of the community can help back you up as well, because we're all in this together. And remember, just because it's a viral video contest does not mean that somebody's going to go and create a video that gets 1 million views. It is entirely possible that the winner is going to have 5,000 views total. So just make the video. You never know. This, as always, and as with everything that we try to do, is a giant question mark. We never know. You never know. And I say this because after the Netherlands retreat, that was definitely made clear to me. We had somebody who came to the Netherlands retreat who actually crowdfunded their ticket. There was no guarantee that that was going to work, but they did it. They put it up, and we were happy to help promote that for them by putting the link on our website. And they managed to get the money together actually rather quickly. And then we got to meet them in person in the Netherlands, which was amazing, just because we had wanted to meet them for quite some time. And not only was it important that they were there, but how they got there really meant a lot. So you never know. Just dive in, make a video, get people to check out that video, make it controversial. I don't care. Pick things that Andrew and I say that piss people off. Maybe that'll help. or tailor it to your own thoughts. Maybe make a commentary, use some clips, do whatever it is you'd like in there. We would love to see what you've got to share about us, for sure. And of course, it does help with Dualistic Unity as a whole, because this is very much about a growing discussion. It's about ripples. And the more ripples we make, the better off we are. And so all of your ripples mean the world to us. So jump in, win that contest if you can, and we will see you in California.
Yes, we got a decent amount of videos already posted from people, and it's awesome to see like some really cool videos out there. And if you don't want to, like, you don't even have to, like, you don't have to be on the screen. It doesn't have to be of you at all. It can be clips from the podcast. It can be, we've seen recordings of the podcast with another video in the background and just tagging us, sharing whatever it may be. It can be as creative as you want it to be. It can be as stale and bland and whatever as you want it to be. And yeah, like there's no guarantee of anything. Like I don't know if a video's gotten more than 1,000 views or 2,000 so far. So yeah, it might as well. And I know TikTok, sometimes random shit goes viral, like really, really random shit, especially. So if you might as well, toss your ticket in the hat, because you never really know. And sometimes things, go viral after a couple weeks. So you want to make sure there's time to do that. So it's February 1st is the last day, but I'm very excited to see how those play out. Because yeah, the other thing is we got retreats coming up February 1st to 5th in Virginia Beach. Yeah, it's a really sick house. You can see it right there. You can click the QR code to see.
There's a chessboard outside, like a giant chessboard outside. So I'm willing to play chess with anyone who wants to play chess, but you got to move your own pieces around, or you can get other community members to help. Ooh, we could do like team chess.
Yeah, we could do like people are things and they move it themselves, and it's like however many people are there, split it up half and half, and just like everyone
We
gets
could play
2 pieces.
wizards chess, Harry.
Yes. Oh, yes, Harry. I want to play wizards chess. It's so much fun. Damn it. I can't. Oh, fuck. I was trying to think of like one of their. I mean, I don't think they say Alakazam. I don't think that's one of them in Harry Potter. But anyway, that's what I thought of as well, was the Harry Potter chess. Because fuck, man, I haven't. I I've yet to see. I think I saw the first 4. I read the first 4 books. I think I saw the first 4 movies. Never saw the ending or any of it. But yeah, maybe I will check that out, because those were interesting stories, and just yeah, kind of cool how you can create a sort of world like that, like just from someone's imagination, being able to come up with stories and things like that is really quite incredible. And it's something too that, like, oh my gosh, since living my life like trying to, just always get into the next thing, become more, what does this mean about me, where am I going, how is this building my idea of myself? It's like there's very little space or time for like reading books or writing stories, despite really, really enjoying that growing up. And yeah, just because with anything that you do that isn't that cookie cutter sort of thing, like societal blueprint, like there's going to be, it's like, oh, well, that's harder to make money doing that. It's like, yeah, there's risk to everything. There's risk to not doing it, not seeing what could have happened if you did that. Like I had no fucking idea when I started doing social media that one day I would be doing all the stuff that we're doing with Dualistic Unity, retreats, podcasts, writing a book, doing the life troubleshooter. Shout out to the life troubleshooter, Dualistic Unity life troubleshooter, which will be live at some point, and it's going to be fucking incredible. Now I want to talk about that, and because that thing, holy fuck, dude, that thing is so sick. Like it's so incredible. Ray's been working on what he's calling the Dualistic Unity life troubleshooter, where basically it's a variation, or it's through ChatGPT, and you can ask it anything, like a thing you would ask someone in a one-on-one coaching call, or on one of our Patreon groups, or in the comments on Twitch. A lot of people will ask certain questions just about their life, like, oh, I've been going through, like an example the other day was, I'm 23, just graduated school, don't really know what I want to do with my life, everything's out of sorts, I feel like I've no stability, no idea of what to do next. I've never really thought about what I want to do with my life. I feel depressed some days, blah, 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 blah. Like, what should I do next? And it basically gave this like super intricate answer that was well thought out. And it was lengthy, but not overly lengthy that you couldn't read it in like a couple minutes. And it kind of covered like all the perspectives. It wasn't giving necessarily an answer of like, this is what you should do, but here are some things to consider. Here's something you may not have been thinking about before, like blah, 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 blah. And it just gives incredible answers. And so I'm really, really excited for that. And he's able to put in the Rolodex of our episodes. So it's able to recognize based on, I don't know whether, and maybe you know this, whether it's based on the title or the description or the actual content of the episode, like how it recommends, because after each answer, it gives a recommendation for, to hear more, listen to season 3, episode 4 of the Dualistic Unity podcast called XYZ, which goes into depth on this more. And so anyway, yeah, I'm very, very excited for that bad boy to
Yeah, absolutely.
make it
And anybody who has a membership for ChatGPT Plus can actually try the troubleshooter right now in its beta version. As Andrew said, it's only been equipped with the insights from season 1, and I say only, but there's a shit ton of stuff in there. It's a really impressive thing. It's adding more nuance all the time, and so we appreciate your feedback. If you want to check it out, you can find the link on our Patreon. I also threw the link on Discord the other day. Alternatively, the QR code is on the screen right now, or the link is in the chat section. Check it out if you have a membership with ChatGPT Plus, because that's unfortunately the only way it can be accessed at the moment. It will be available on their new GPT store next month. I am very excited about that. And at that point, I'm hoping that it will have at least 2 or 3 more seasons worth of nuanced information and insights to be sharing with people. At the moment, it's just fucking incredible, honestly. But that doesn't mean that it can't use some tweaking here and there. So however it goes for you, let us know on Discord, tag me or Andrew, or send me an email, or let us know on Patreon what the responses were like and what you thought of them, because that really does help us out for sure. That said, going back to what you were saying about fiction and all of that fun stuff, I recently had a burst of creativity in terms of writing a story, and I posted a bunch of that to our community Discord. And so I'm going to, not our community Discord, to our community Patreon. So Patreon members, any tier on Patreon member of a Patreon member, can access the first 4 chapters. I think first 4 or 5 chapters of this story are currently on Patreon. You can check that shit out, as well as the images that were created using AI to go along with each and every chapter. And I've been really impressed by those. There's one on the screen right now about one of our main characters going through the shitstorm that is consciousness. So it's a good story. I was pretty stoked about it. I'm getting very involved. I'm looking forward to getting back into it now that I've returned from the Netherlands. I've got a bunch of new insights I'd like to throw in there. But if anybody would like to check out that story, if you feel like a good read, do check it out. Let me know what you think. It's kind of a slowish build, but then it picks up in intensity, and I'm curious to see where it goes. And that's the fun part. I never understood this, because when I was younger, I used to love to write, but I used to always get so fixated on the right way, on the right ending, right? And so I would end up in writer's block all the time. Whereas with this, I have no idea where it's going to go. I have no idea where it's going to go. What I do know is that I've went in like several different tangents and then cropped them out and went right back to where it was and started in a different direction. And as such, it's informing me more than I'm informing it, which is a really fun experience. So I would love to get your feedback on that. Going back though, I would say if I was going to recommend some fiction, because it's tough, because we go through school and they tell us like, you got to do all of this stuff for a purpose. You have to do all of this stuff for an end result. You have to do all of this stuff for your future. And eventually you just stop doing anything that's not for your future or for some purpose or to get you ahead or make you feel better. Like you just stop doing things for the sake of doing them. And reading is one of the first ones to go. Our love of reading is beaten out of us. We don't even remember how stoked we were when we first learned to read. We're like, yeah. And it was a great feeling to first learn how to read, right? But then all of a sudden it's just for school. It's just for school. It's just for school. Then it's just for work. And the love of reading just gets beaten out of you. And so if I was going to recommend anything in terms of some great fictions to start out with, I would say there's some good conscious stories. Like if you enjoy this conversation, then you would likely enjoy some of these stories. First one that comes to mind would be Ishmael. Ishmael, I think it's by Daniel Quinn. Great story. Is actually the basis for the movie Instinct. that we did a movie review on, a movie with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Anthony Hopkins. You can find the Dualistic Unity movie review of Instinct on our YouTube channel, or of course on the podcast platforms. But I recommend watching it on the YouTube channel because there's video clips in there that add to the experience. Anyway, so Ishmael by Daniel Quinn, The Celestine Prophecy, great story, great story. The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, another solid story, and all of which are based around a lot of the insights that we talk about here, or at least the foundational insights that we talk about here on the podcast. But they're all really good stories as well. They keep you enthralled, they keep you engaged with the story from start to finish. And so I would recommend those 3 books. I'm sure I'll have more that I can throw out there, but as fiction goes, they're really good. Oh, and of course, if you're looking for just a good laugh with a touch of conscious humor, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is an absolutely must read, but that one is a bit daunting. And it's just because if you haven't been reading for a long time, the other 3 books that I recommended are they're bite size. You look at them, you're like, that's not that long. It's like less than an inch thick. I can read that. Then you get to the Hitchhiker's Guide, and it's a trilogy in 5 parts, just to pass along some of the sense of humor that goes behind this, because obviously a trilogy is not 5 parts, or is it? It really comes down to how the writer defines it, right? The point is that it's huge. Like, it's way bigger because it is essentially 5 books, right? It's like you could get the books individually, or you can get it all in one version. But that book in itself is amazing. It pushes the envelope in terms of not just conscious comedy, things that are obvious and funny, but as well as imagination. Like, it's crazy how good that book is and how far it goes in terms of things happening in time and space and the creation of the earth, the ultimate question, the ultimate answer, all of these things. And at the same time, taking a moment or two to comment on how ridiculous it is that humans need to create bypasses to get from point A to point B faster, regardless of the fact that there's no real purpose to getting to point B faster. There's no element of fulfillment to that. It's just the thing to do. And he makes a lot of commentary about humanity, about how ridiculous our self-judgments are, about the ridiculous assumptions we make about others and our place in the universe. It's a fantastic book. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is. I'll just throw that out there. We have about 12 minutes left, and somebody's like, what book again? I listed 3. And Dune. Dune by Frank Herbert is possibly one of the best books that I could recommend, because it's all about consciousness, awakening, a little bit of prophecy, some psychedelic shit in there too. It's great. Dune by Frank Herbert, Ishmael by Daniel Quinn, pretty sure. Celestine Prophecy by Redfield, I want to say. I could be wrong. And what else did I recommend?
Monk.
Hitchhiker's Guide, and The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, which is another great story. That story is actually about kind of a high-powered and high-success lawyer who had a heart attack. I think it was in the courtroom, and as a result, gave up all of his life and went looking for a state of mind that was going to save him from his heart attack, as it were. And then he comes back years later, after basically traveling around and figuring out how to live kind of like a monk. And he talks to somebody who used to idolize him, who's going through the same spiral of stress and control that he was, that led to his heart attack. And so the whole book is a conversation between this person who's already done it the hard way and learned from it versus somebody who's on their way towards the fucking precipice. And so it's a great conversation of like, but this is important. It's like, but is it? It's like, well, you certainly thought so. It's like, yeah, I did, but this is why. Right. And so the conversation is fantastic. It's a really good read. The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. I highly recommend that.
Not going to say it's exactly like DU, but I was thinking of some parallels possibly between the podcasts.
Ishmael. My God, man, Ishmael. Well, you remember the movie Instinct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Ishmael is very much a conversation about captivity. It's a conversation about mentality. It's a conversation about the rise of the taker mentality that changed the world and changed humanity. It's fucking amazing. It's a solid story. It just happens to include a telepathic ape.
Fuck yeah, dude. Like fucking reading was something I'm still reeling from the just the constant striving to get somewhere and then, not just doing things for the sake of doing them. And reading was absolutely a thing that went like reading a fictional book. I was able to get some nonfiction books in there, but only it was like, the self-help stuff, Power of Now, Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, things like that, things that were gonna help me do the thing that I think. But then again, like even maintaining that perspective, like you don't know how something's going to impact you or your personality. Like Jay threw in the comments here, read Hitchhiker's Guide in my teens, foundational material informing my sense of humor. Jay, love your sense of humor, man. That's fucking awesome. And like that is the things that then have impact on ourselves. Like, holy fuck, we think we're constantly thinking, again, I'm constantly thinking that you got to figure out the right thing to do, best thing to do, discounting everything else. And so you focus on just that. There isn't the focus, there isn't the ability to, and now I got all these books written down and like, I'm way more excited about getting into this sort of stuff because it's like fucking, they're interesting and they're cool and exciting and like things can be that. Like learning about a story, thinking about a story when you're doing something that's you're just doing it for the sake of doing it. Like you can do all of the things that you're striving for, whatever doing, but then taking that time to just do some stuff like that. And even from the perspective of like, striving to get places, like setting aside time to not try to strive to get somewhere is vital as well. We totally discount that like that kind of gets I like what's the point if not to relax a little bit more, if not to chill the fuck out a little bit more. But yeah, and with all those books, they sound really, really interesting. Hitchhiker's Guide. That's something. It's funny because I used to carpool with my neighbor on the way to school in middle school, or like my neighbor's dad would drive, and he always had Hitchhiker's Guide, the audiobook, on in the car. And like I never, I think I was like, I don't know, 11, 12, whenever that was. So I'm sure there's going to be, it would be interesting to think if there's going to be points in the book that like, oh, I feel like I've read this before. Just a couple of things because he had that on the whole ride. Like we wouldn't really talk. We would just like, no, this is what's happening. This is my fucking car, and we're gonna listen to this thing. And I wasn't, I was probably a little too young to understand, but I remember it being kind of wacky, like a little bit wacky, the way that it was playing out. And I probably wasn't at a point that I could appreciate so much the sense of humor that they had in it. It just seemed like something that just didn't make sense, was kind of my perspective. Like I wasn't able to fully follow it. And I think I was probably half paying attention and half, worried about whatever test or quiz I had coming up that week. And half the time I was probably like doing homework in the car because sometimes I would just do that in the morning. But anyway, so yeah, it's I'm very excited to just dig in more to those things. And like I was saying, like with getting back to New York, gonna start taking some Wing Chun classes, get into that, and just a number of things where it's like, all right, let's dig into some experience. Let's do some uncomfortable shit, make myself, like I was talking about before, like running towards the things you're worried about or afraid of, and like just being able to do them without taking yourself so seriously. Whereas in the past, if I ever took up something like a martial art, it would be to become a black belt, it would be, and the thought of doing like one, like the one that you're able to find for me, that doesn't have, it's just like group classes. I probably would have avoided those ones. It's like, what do you mean I'm just going there to to do it in a group and there's no trajectory there. There's no thing that I'm becoming. There's no achievement in that. Like it's so funny to think that now it's like, yeah, obviously that's the best one. Like going there for the sake of doing it, building sensitivity, whatever. But in the past, I would have probably seen that and been like, no, I want the one where it's like, I need to know how it's going to go, like a planned out thing. It's like, this is a 6-month class. The first month is going to be this. The second month is going to be this. Whereas this place is very much just like 4 days a week, group classes. That's it. And then there, you can take private lessons and then you can train to become a teacher, master, whatever they call it. But yeah, the main one is just open training. Anyone shows up, it's a hour block typically, I think. So that, and then I was also thinking about there's some run clubs in New York, and I've been more interested in that, but there aren't any cannabis forward ones. There are some in other cities. So I was thinking, because that's something that's uncomfortable for me too. Like, you know, haven't just coming up with that and having people show up and kind of like leading a group run or something, like just maybe doing that once a month, even just to start out, just as something else that's like, yeah, that would make me a little bit uncomfortable to be there, especially if I'm a little bit baked, but you know, just things like that. So I'm excited
Yeah, but
for.
it's yours. So I mean, fuck it. You show up, you're like, I'm high, and we're running. Let's go. And that's pretty much it. Like, how hard is that? But it'd be great if we could come up with some DU brand merch to give out to the people who are running with you. I mean, why the fuck not? Something that promotes, running high. That'd be a lot of fun. Yeah, no, that's great. Well, this is it. Push yourself. Get out there, do it. Because at least then, 10 years down the road, you're going to look back and go, wow, I learned a lot from that stuff. Rather than, oh, I really want to get out and learn more about myself. Do it now, right? Because I mean, all you have is now. And it's as simple as just jumping in if you can. Is Ray in the New York City area? I am not. I am not. I am on the other side of the continent entirely. That said, though, it doesn't mean I don't visit the States. But if I did, I wouldn't be fucking running. I just want to make that clear. As much as I respect the running, as much as I encourage the running, and I, want you all to get out there and run. I've served my time running. I'm not a fan of running. I might run one day. I have no desire to run right now. But that doesn't mean I won't go to New York City and get high. I'll meet you where you're all running too. How about that? And I'll just sit there getting high while you're doing it. Sounds good to me. This has been a lot of fun. We still got about a minute and a half left. I just want to remind everybody that we're on Patreon after this for an hour. You can join us. It's a tier 1 call, so it's all inclusive. All the tiers can join. Typically, it's a pretty good sized group, which is awesome. We always appreciate everybody who can show up. It's an hour long, and we're just going to shoot the breeze on Zoom. So you can join us. Patreon.com/Dualistic Unity. All the details have been posted for that group already today. Not only that, but of course, we do groups 5 days a week. So you can shoot the breeze with us 5 days a week. Share your insights, share your stories, ask us questions, or just hang, which is always kind of nice as well. If you're doing something, you're working at home, you're going for a walk, you just want to listen while everybody else is sharing and shooting the shit, that's okay too. That'd be just great. We just want to say thank you again for joining us, everyone. And Andrew, thank you, man, for embodying the ambition to just be, and that's really it. Like you're not trying to be anything. And I say ambition kind of tongue in cheek, but really, I mean, you've done so much work towards just letting go that the reward is when you've finally done all that, you're on the ground floor and you can decide where you want to go from there. Because you got rid of all of that shitty scaffolding you were building underneath without really paying attention to it. And all of a sudden, all that's gone, and you're like, what do I want to do for me? Not for me to be more, but for me to experience more of me. Now, it's a great place to be. I'm excited to share it with you, man.
Likewise, man. And I appreciate you for not showing me anything, like actually showing me that, oh, there isn't so much a right way. Oh, there's not a right way to be spiritual. I can like do dumb shit. And it's actually not better, but like it's an option to do dumb shit. And that's actually something that is all right to do. And it's so funny because, and I know we're at time now, but like how much right now I feel like, oh, like I can just chill the fuck out and like actually maybe it's, better to be a like goof around and like forget what I'm saying and like fuck around and just do whatever and not take myself so seriously. Like it, not that that's it or the answer or anything, but like that it's an option. And it seems so fucking basic right now, but like, yeah, there's been a long fucking journey to just realize that. And there's a lot of reasons that we don't do that. And so it's yeah, I don't know. In spots where you are clear, and I'll be through plenty of other fucking shit. But yeah, it's yeah, I'm enjoying doing it with you. And yeah, anyway. Join us on Patreon in 14 minutes. Bye everyone.
Fuck yeah. See you later soon. Or see you later soon. See you later, everyone. I'll talk to you soon. There you go. You see how everything gets compressed? I'm going to leave this in too. Bye, everyone.
Soon